Hello there. Today we're doing something a little bit different. Today we're going to do a book tag video because I was tagged by Alyssa, aka Nerdy Nurse Reads. Alyssa has a great channel. Her tastes are different from mine, but that's okay. There's lots of books out there and lots of different types of readers. The questions. Number 1, describe your reading taste in one sentence. I am an absolute literature snob. I care about literature with a capital L. I have no patience for anything that is not literature. I love the old stuff. I love the big, fat, thick stuff. It's got to be in the ultimate category. I feel that there is literature up here. That's what I care about. There's everything else, which I consider dreck. And there is a very mysterious mid-overlapping area, which is what I call the book club books. What do I mean by that? Well, books that some people might consider literature, but there is a question mark in my mind as to their literary value. For example, The Life of Pi, outrageously, stupendously popular when it got published, and it won the Booker Award. Tra-la. And I read it, and I thought it was stupid. But everybody went into raptures about this book, and so I read it again, like maybe 5 years later, which, it's very rare that I will read a book a second time so soon afterwards, because I just wanted to make sure. Wait a minute, everyone. You love this book. I think it's silly. I'll read it again just to make sure. And I read it a second time, and I was convinced that The Life of Pi, it's a book for teenagers, not adults. The Life of Pi is not literature. That's what I mean about book club books. It's crap. I know that was more than one sentence. I love literature. The stuff that people roll their eyes and say, oh, really, God, you read that kind of stuff? That's what I read. And you should too. Describe your reading taste with categories: genre, age, length. Genre, just literature. That's the thing about literature, is that it can be divided into all sorts of genres. I just read Butcher's Crossing by John Williams, and that is pure, perfect American literature, but you could also describe it as a Western. 1984 by George Orwell, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, those are science fiction novels, but they're literature. We don't call that science fiction, it's literature. The vast majority of literature, I guess you would, if you wanted to put it into a genre, you would have to call it a romance novel. Ernest Hemingway's novel, The Sun Also Rises, that is technically a romance, but it's not, you see, that's literature. So just literature, capital L. Okay, age, mid-19th century, say 1860 to 1980. 120 years. Anything after the year 2000, I have to admit, I have a very bad attitude about it. I don't care to read anything that was published after the year 2000. I want the date to start with a 1. Length, I like big novels. I think anything over 400 pages, I get a little bit of a, yes, this is going to take some time, but they don't bother me, they don't intimidate me. One of the books I'm going to be reading soon is Illywhacker by the Australian novelist Peter Carey. And I think that's 600 pages, but it doesn't bother me. Usually longer books are richer and deeper. You spend so much time with them. A short novel, as wonderful as they might be, seem to be a bit ephemeral, because you might love it, as I love the very short novel, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, but the experience you have with it is so fleeting. I find it a bit harder to love a short novel as much as I love the big fat ones. Show us a few books that represent your reading tastes. These are the books that represent my taste in literature. The Stone Angel by the Canadian author Margaret Lawrence. I go into raptures every single time I talk about this book. Sherwood Anderson, Winesburg, Ohio. American novel from 1919. Absolutely love this novel. If you want to be a writer, this is the book to read. This is like an education for a writer. Emile Zola, The Masterpiece. I love Emile Zola. I've read 3 of his novels. So far, this is my favorite. This book, I think, makes it very easy to love Emile Zola. This next one, I'm a little bit, I would like to keep this book to myself. Oh, well. Independent People by Halldór Laxness. Perhaps the greatest novel ever to come out of Iceland. This novel is baffling. It resonates. I read it, when did I read it? 2019. And I still feel it deeply resonating within me, this novel. And of course, a Hungarian novel, Journey by Moonlight by Antal Serb. So looking at those, North American, European, I didn't get any Japanese novels. I really carefully selected those. Those books form my reading personality. I love these books and I cherish them, and I would recommend them to absolutely everyone. Right there, you are holding the world in your hands if you read those books. Number 4, a book you didn't enjoy that seemed like it would be to your tastes. That's a heartbreaking question to ask, but I do have some very recent examples. Hans Fallada, Little Man What Now? 2 years ago I read The Drinker by Hans Fallada. Absolutely loved it. It seems like Hans Fallada is getting this English translations renaissance. Wow, I was so eager to get another book. And I bought this one, $10. This book is held up as a frank, stark depiction of Germany in the 1930s. The Nazi Party is on the rise. And I was looking forward to that. I imagined this sense of encroaching dread, but I didn't get that. I got something that was almost like a slapstick comedy. Every chapter, there's some problem, but it's written in a very almost surreal kind of like a silly way. In the first chapter, we meet the couple. They go to the doctor. Doctor tells them she's pregnant. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? We're both so poor. Chapter 2, they go to meet her parents. Before they go to meet her parents, he says, why don't we get married? Why don't we do it? And she says, well, I guess you better come and meet my parents. And her parents are awful. And they criticize him and shake their heads, and nothing's good about this boy or this marriage idea. But young people are going to do whatever they do, so good luck to the both of you. Chapter 3. This man has a job. It's not a very good job, and he knows that the man that he works for wants him to marry his daughter. And he feels that if he comes in and says, oh, I got married at the weekend, he will instantly get fired. It's kind of a goofball comedy. Everything is played for laughs. Everything is comically absurd, not tragically. And everything has some kind of a quick fix solution. We know it's only temporary. We know that it's this solution that they discover for this immediate problem is probably going to lead to further problems down the line, but I just didn't enjoy it. They refer to the baby as the shrimp. I think the shrimp is on every single page of this book. I got so annoyed with seeing these two words, the shrimp, the shrimp. I feel for the translators. I understand that there's nothing you could do if the author decides that this is the comical little name that he's going to use to refer to the baby over and over and over. And I guess in German, they most commonly refer to people by their surnames. When the name of the character is repeated multiple times on every goddamn page of the book, it becomes so annoying just to see the same name. The main character's name is Pineberg, Pinneberg, and his wife's name, he calls her Lambchen, like little lamb, I suppose. Constantly, Pineberg, Lambchen, the shrimp. It was so annoying to read this book, and like there's one character who's a Nazi, not in the way we think of Nazis today, sort of as, I don't want to be very specific, but in certain countries, certain people who have very extremely right-wing views, the way that perhaps in today's society, they feel quite free about giving voice to their extremely right-wing opinions. Yeah, there's a character in this who is like that. In a way, it was kind of a nice reflection for what's happening in society today, but tragic, of course, because we know what it leads to historically. Yes, in that way, it is a bit frightening, but he's a colleague from the first job, and Pineberg gets fired from that job, and then he moves off to the outskirts of Berlin. He gets another job, and that's about it. Apparently, this book was very, very popular because it was one of the first depictions of the poverty in Germany and the plight, the unemployment, the very hard struggles that German people had, making a life for themselves at this point in history. They turned it into a movie, and it was produced by Jewish producers, and it got Hans Fallada really very strictly on a watch list in Germany. Perhaps because of this book, it led to some of his better writing. I have another one on my shelf. Every Man Dies Alone. Anyway, I thought that was tedious to read. Gazabura Oe, Teach Us to Outgrow Our Madness. I was so looking forward to reading this. It's 4 novellas. They're all ridiculous. The last one is good, but the first one, there is a madman in a hospital bed who is dictating his last will and testament to a nurse who's not very cooperative. The nurse keeps interjecting into the story. So it's a first-person narrative, this man giving his opinion about the fact that he's going to die soon of liver cancer, even though all the doctors and nurses assure him most vociferously that he does not have liver cancer. But he knows that he does, and he'll be dying soon. So he's dictating this very personal will and testament, talking quite a lot about his mother, and the nurse is interjecting, and sometimes the doctor's interjecting, and it doesn't make a goddamn bit of sense. And if you want to read it and try to untangle the narrative and say, well, you see, here he's being delusional about this, and here, it's a commentary about Japanese history, fine, go ahead and do that, and then stick it up your ass afterwards, because I just don't care. The second story is a black American airman in the Second World War is captured by this small Japanese village. They keep him prisoner. It goes pretty much where you think it's going to go. And there's one really wildly disturbing little, where the hell did that come from? Come on. Kazabura Oe, you should have taken that out. That was ridiculous. I'm not trying to generate any sales or marketing for this book, but there's this one paragraph that was so ghastly. First time I've used ghastly on my channel. Third story, a very big fat man has a very big fat son, mentally disabled. This man feels that he has a very strong psychic connection to his son, and it's traumatic. He feels that he experiences his son's pain and agony just as acutely as his son does. And this is highlighted by when he takes his son in for an eye exam because he feels that his son is nearly blind. And of course, his son, with his disability, does not want to cooperate with the eye exam. It's just awful. The fourth story I really enjoyed. It's really weird. It's about this very talented composer, thinks that ghostly apparition comes and visits him from the sky periodically. He explains to the ghostly apparition how society is working. This composer's father feels that his son has gone completely mad, and he hires another man to accompany him around Tokyo so that he doesn't get lost or doesn't get into too much trouble. The fourth story I really enjoyed. I thought that one was quite good. It had a very nice surprise ending that I didn't see coming, but the three stories previous, awful. If you want to read the fourth story, it's called Agui, the Sky Monster. That's the name of the creature that comes down from the sky. This is the last one. I started reading this book 7 or 8 years ago, and I got that far. Page 314 of a 720-page novel. This novel is held up as one of the greatest achievements in literature just about by everyone. And this is only part 1, and it's enormous, 720 pages. Part 2 is even longer. And I have to tell you very sincerely, I almost never abandon a book. Once every 5 years, I will read 50 pages. Maybe I will try a little bit harder, read another 50 pages, and just say, I can't do it. It's too awful. I had to stop, and I remember why. It's just nothing happens in this book. Nothing happens at all. It is the most tedious, stupid, drag-ass story of these three characters on one part of the story, and maybe this man's going to have an affair with this man's wife. On the other side of the story, there's some killer who's been sentenced to be executed. It is so completely awful. And it's a shame because I had such high expectations for this. It's on every list of the greatest literature. Everyone thinks this is a masterpiece. $12 fucking I paid for this thing. All of my favorite artists are from Vienna. Gustav Klimt, Egon Schiele. Like, you may not know it, but I have a picture of Egon Schiele hanging over me every time I make a video. The complete oddball, Hundertwasser, is from Vienna. Absolutely hated this. All right, the video's gonna be too long if I carry on like that. A book you enjoyed that you didn't think would be your taste. Okay, so this isn't the copy. This is a different one, but 5 years ago I read Eugène Grandet by Honoré de Balzac. I couldn't believe how much I love that book. You know, it starts off in this very typical way I see now because I've read so much French literature since then. This very picturesque description of a street and a house, and it's quite boring. But I've come to learn that this is how these French authors almost always start their novels. They start with a very careful depiction of the setting. It's almost like if you went to see a play and the curtains parted. Before the actors came out on the stage, you just got to look at the set And you got to say, okay, all right, so here's where it's all going to take place. Eugène Grandet starts like that, and then we go into the house and we meet the characters. As soon as I began to understand the father's character, Monsieur Grandet, I love that novel. I read that novel so fast. To this day, I hold it up as one of my favorite books of all time. I made a video of it such a long time ago. It still gets a lot of views. So I didn't imagine I would love Eugène Grandet, but it made me a huge Balzac fan. And so I read Eugène Grandet, I read The Black Sheep, love that. Cousin Bet, not as much. This year I read a collection of short stories called The Human Comedy, which was hit and miss. And I'm going to continue reading Balzac for the rest of my life. Every year, a novel by Balzac, because he's got so many, and he'll probably outlast me. I didn't think I was going to love this book as much as I did, The Remains of the Day, because, to let you know how old I am, I remember watching the television commercials for the film, and I remember Anthony Hopkins looking so stiff and prim and proper. And in the television commercial, he's ironing a newspaper to give to he's a butler. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Anthony Hopkins plays a butler in this old English manor, and he works for this very wealthy, titled British, upper class. In the television commercial, he's ironing a newspaper to give to his employer. And I thought, Jesus Christ, if that doesn't look like the most boring thing I've ever seen in my entire life, like why would they make a movie, pay Anthony Hopkins to iron a newspaper? Why? I read it and just fell in love with it. I couldn't even put it down. I remember when I read this, I used to do some background work in Vancouver, and I was working on a television show called Altered Carbon. I had to run around in a field at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was raining, and I had this book under my costume, just because every time they said cut and they reset, I could just read a couple of more sentences, even though the book was getting ruined in the rain. I've never seen the show, but I'm 100% sure that 8 hours of running around in a field in the middle of the night in the rain, trying to read Kazuo Ishiguro, none of it got used. So stupid. Never thought I would love that. And Kazuo Ishiguro, I've had such a hard time with his literary output, because once I read that, I wanted to read all of his other books. Let's just leave it there. Let's not make the video so go 5 fucking hours. Show us some of the books on your TBR that look like they would exactly be your taste. Okay, this is a bit dangerous because Lord knows if they will or they won't. So once I fell in love with Balzac, everybody said, Grant, what about Zola? And I said, well, I've never read any. And once I did, wow, Zola took first place. I love Zola more than anyone. In 2026, my big goal is to read the entire 20-volume series of the Rue Jean Marquette, like over 9,000 pages of literature, 20 full big novels, and this is one of them, Potluck. This was sent to me by Susan in England. Thank you very much, Susan, for sending me this. It was very kind of you. Listen to this. Potluck is the 10th in Zola's Rue Jean Marquette cycle of 20 novels, illustrating the influence of environment on characters from all levels of society. Zola's most acerbic fictional satire. The novel is set in a newly constructed apartment block in the Rue de Choiseul in Paris. Seemingly a place of prosperity and harmony, it is riddled with snobbery and hypocrisy. Privilege forms but a thin veneer of respectability between the bourgeoisie tenants who live in comfortable heated apartments and their servants who live in cold, partitioned cubicles under the roof and work in the building's filthy kitchens. Systematically exposing the contradictions that pervade bourgeoisie life, Zola reveals a multitude of adulteries and betrayals, a veritable melting pot of moral and sexual degeneracy. How good is that going to be? Nothing beats Zola these days. Max Frisch, I'm not Stiller. It's a case of mistaken identity. Everybody thinks he's Stiller, but he's not Stiller. It's that long, and that's the problem. He's not Stiller, but everybody thinks he is Stiller. It's going to be so good. Born in Zurich. Wow, we don't get too many Swiss writers on the channel. Hardly any at all. Swiss writers? Do I know any? Can't think of any off the top of my head. The Leopard by Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa. The Leopard. This is also on just about every list of great literature, especially European literature. I've never heard of this author. I think he only wrote this one book of fiction. I think I'm going to love that book. I love Italian writers. I know it's very stereotypical, but they do write with a great deal of passion and understanding of human nature. It is marvelous how Italian writers, Italo Calvino, Primo Levi, Alberto Moravia, they just have this gift for capturing the human spirit. My friend John Rawlins keeps trying to get me to read this one, The Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. And I will read it, John. I will. Just 2025 has been very American heavy for literature for me, which is not bad. It's just that I really do try to go from country to country to country so that I get a good taste of everything. And being a Canadian, I grew up surrounded by American literature. I think until I moved to Europe, 90% of my reading was American literature. And it was only once I got to Europe that I started to get a taste for non-American literature. It was just such a surprise for me as a Canadian how much American literature we are exposed to and how little foreign literature we are exposed to. Toni Morrison, Song of Solomon. My friend John Rawlins, who's extremely well-read, tells me that this is her best book, better than Beloved. And I certainly hope so, because Beloved was a little bit too violent for me. I like violence, but I guess there are degrees and there are circumstances where you can tolerate it better than others. Now this one I'm really quite unsure about, but I need to get a Canadian on the list. Ernest Buckler, The Cruelest Month. Ernest Buckler, one of the most neglected Canadian authors of all time, because I thought he had only written one book, which is called The Mountain in the Valley. My second favorite Canadian novel of all time. Absolutely love it. If you can find yourself a copy of The Mountain in the Valley, please do so. It's probably next to impossible if you live outside of Canada. Even in Canada, they're unusual in the secondhand bookstores. The Mountain in the Valley is at least still sometimes taught in universities, so you will see editions of it floating around. But this one you will almost never see. The problem with this book is that it's so old, I'm even afraid to open it. Like, I'll show you, but I just have to be so delicate with this book. Look at that. You know, and I really have to be very careful of not cracking the spine, because if I crack that spine, the book will just split right in half. The Mountain in the Valley is such an amazing book. I hope this one is going to have some of the same emotional resonance. A booktuber you watch with similar taste as you. I almost never watch any other booktubers. I think that I should, to get some tips on how to make better videos, like better quality, better looking, what's going on, who's popular and why they're popular. Look at their videos as a bit of an education. But I rarely watch any other booktubers, simply because I have so many books to read that I don't need someone saying this book is really amazing, because then I will want to have that book. And I've got such a mountain of books to read that I don't even want to know about any other books at this point in my life. But if I did have to choose one, not that he needs, me to recommend him because he's really quite popular, is this guy, I don't know his name, his channel's called Leaf by Leaf. He's a deep thinker. He really gets into the books and he really goes for the deeper meanings and the understanding of the books. I'm not a superficial reader, but I love reading. I love stories. I love characters. I love conflict. I love surprising twists. I do notice and I do see deeper levels of psychology at work, but I don't pause and examine it because I find that kind of sucks the life out of a book. When I was at university and we studied Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, I might enjoy that book, but it's been just so drained of all of its pleasure because of how it's been dissected under the microscope. And now, there's no more joy to be got out of the book because it's been desiccated by all of these smart university people who have just, word by word, they've just shredded the book and distilled all of its meaning. And they said, there you go, there's the meaning. Yeah, I think you can lose your enjoyment for a book doing that. Anyway, Leaf by Leaf. I think he's really got some good stuff. I watch other YouTubers because I like to see what other people are reading, but closest to my taste, it's got to be the Leaf by Leaf guy. Have you always had this taste in books, or has it changed? No, it's very definitely changed. When I was in my 20s, I liked very flamboyant, loud, stylistic literature. Martin Amis, he wrote London Fields, he wrote Time's Arrow, and he also wrote a book called Dead Babies, which is really wild. Who else was there? There was Louis de Bernay. He wrote this trilogy, The War of Don Emanuel's Nether Parts, and the next two, I can't remember the names of them. Tibor Fischer. Tibor Fischer wrote a wild, crazy book called The Thought Gang. These three authors, not to say that it is style over content, but it really seems like they put all of their efforts into these very extravagantly carbonated kinds of sentences. Really ridiculous phrases and metaphors that you've never seen before. And it's very colorful, it's very flavorful, it's very exciting to a young person. You know, when you're a young teenager and you read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's a lot of fun, right? But you stop reading it in your 30s and 40s. You don't read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when you're 44 years old. It becomes too immature for you. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just that you mature out of the zone where The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is going to be enjoyable to read. When you're a teenager, it's fun, it's exciting. And when I was in my early 20s, Martin Amis, Tibor Fischer, and Louis de Bernay, wow, love those books. Like, it just seemed like so much fun. I didn't know people could write with such wild exuberance in the grammar and in the vocabulary. And eventually I mellowed. Maybe I became a little bit boring. Probably a lot of people would say that. And I just started to like a more stripped down style, Cormac McCarthy, J.M. Coetzee. And I also like the older French stuff with the big, grand, epic story of families and romance and money. I love those stories. I know it's very old-fashioned, but it's very rich. It's very satisfying to have all of this dramatic tension that is building and building and building, and to reach this, I hate to use the phrase, this epic conclusion. The ending of The Black Sheep by Balzac, holy God, that's an ending. The entire story of the masterpiece, this man's life. He's a young man, he's an artist, he has this vision of what he wants to paint. He is frustrated his entire life, his entire career. He dies in the end. Tragically. That is a story. That's how I've changed. Like, I'm not a big fan of that crazy style. And it's funny because when I was young, I read that Martin Amis's father, Kingsley Amis, who was also extremely well-respected author in his own right, he hated his son's writing because of what I just said. He thought it was too over the top, too colorful, too many fireworks. He said it was because his son Martin, in writing that way, is putting too much of his personality into the literature. He felt that you should not write that way. You should write in the very opposite way, that the author should disappear from the literature. I have to say, I agree with Kingsley Amis today more than I used to do, well, 30 years ago. And like, when you read Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson, you don't see Sherwood Anderson. You just see the literature. Sherwood Anderson, he's not there. You don't see his fingerprint all over the pages. But when you read The Thought Gang by Tibor Fischer, you just feel this author desperate to try to get all of the juice into every single sentence, and it becomes overwhelming. Too much of their strong artistic personalities coming through, and they're trying too hard. It's like when a mediocre artist uses really eye-popping colors. Like whenever a celebrity starts to get the idea that they're a painter, Sylvester Stallone, you can see that they use the most gaudy colors that they can find. You know, these bright, vivid greens and these neon pink colors. A real, true artist would never use those colors because they're too hard on the eye, and they don't mix with the other colors. So I think when I was younger, I did like those really bright, vibrant, whoa, every sentence is like a little Jack in the Box. And now it's like, no, I would prefer to read 400 pages of women in love. You know, these two sisters who are dating these two boys, and just nothing happens for nearly 500 pages. And it's like, wow, that's life. Yes, nothing happens, that's life. I feel that was much, much, much too long. Sorry, I got carried away. This is, I don't do book tags. So when I get to show a lot of books, I get a little bit overexcited, like a child with too many toys. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alyssa, for nominating me for the book tag. I would like to do more of these because I'm having some really difficult time finding the time to make the videos recently, because I'm at university again. I'm in a master's degree program for creative writing, and for the next 2 years I have to write a novel. Writing a novel is not the only task. I also have to read books that are similar to the one that I want to write and write book reports on them. So my reading these days is mainly for school, and as a stipulation, it has to be a book published within the last 10 years. I am not a 21st century book lover. I like the literature of the 20th century and the 19th century. And the 21st century, I'm really quite comfortable leaving that for the modern generation. That's your literature. It's not mine. I love the 20th century. That is, I feel, the greatest literature of all. And Shakespeare. All right, Grant, Jesus, won't you stop talking? Nobody's watching at this point in the video. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Please like and subscribe. All right, everybody, stopping the video now. Too much coffee again. The noise that's coming from outside. There's construction, there's sirens going off. God damn it. Oh, the noise. Please try to ignore the sounds of construction outside. Let's leave it there. Really, if I keep going like this, the video is just going to go on and on and on. Extravagantly bouncy. Come on, Grant, think of a proper word. Extravagantly, don't say flamboyant because you said that already. You know, these very extravagantly carbonated kinds of sentences. There's construction outside, Jesus Christ. I get a couple of hours when my wife and son are out in the construction. I just can't win.